Ethan Cole sat alone in his small mining station, staring at the endless blackness of space through the thick glass window. The asteroid belt around him was quiet, except for the occasional flashes of light from distant mining drones. He had spent 3 years working here, maintaining machines, extracting valuable minerals, and sending cargo ships back to Earth. It was a lonely life, but Ethan didn't mind. He liked the silence. No wars, no politics, no distractions, just him and the stars. But tonight, something felt different. His console beeped suddenly, breaking the silence. Ethan frowned and leaned forward. The screen displayed an incoming object, moving fast toward his sector. "That's not a cargo ship," he muttered. He tapped a few buttons, zooming in on the object. It was a small escape pod, spinning slightly, its thrusters flickering weakly. The trajectory was unstable. It was going to crash. Ethan jumped to his feet, grabbing his jacket. He didn't know who was inside, but one thing was certain: they wouldn't survive the crash without help. A crash in the dark. Ethan hopped onto his hoverbike, speeding across the rocky surface of the asteroid toward the crash site. The dust kicked up behind him as he navigated through jagged cliffs and deep craters. In the distance, he could already see a plume of smoke rising. When he arrived, the escape pod was half buried in the ground, its metal surface scorched from entry. Sparks flew from a broken panel. Ethan hurried forward, his heart pounding. He pressed a button on the pod's outer panel, forcing the emergency hatch to open. The door hissed, releasing a wave of steam. Inside, in the dim red emergency light, a figure lay motionless. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't human. The figure was a woman, but unlike any he had ever seen. Her skin was silver, almost metallic, with faint glowing lines running along her arms and neck. Her hair was a soft, deep blue, falling over her shoulders. Her face, though alien, was strikingly beautiful, with delicate features and sharp, luminous violet eyes that fluttered open as she gasped for breath. Ethan hesitated only a second before reaching inside. Whoever she was, she needed help. A plea for help. Ethan carried the alien woman back to his hoverbike, carefully securing her before racing back to the station. She was weak, barely conscious, her breathing ragged. Back inside, he placed her on a medical cot, grabbing his emergency kit. As he scanned her vitals, her eyes flickered open, locking onto his. "Dodie, where am I?" she whispered, her voice soft but urgent. "You're on mining station Delta 7, Ethan replied. "You crashed. You're lucky to be alive." She winced, trying to sit up, but her body trembled. Ethan gently pushed her back down. "Easy. You're hurt." Her fingers gripped his wrist, surprisingly strong despite her weakened state. "You must help me, please." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Who are you?" She took a shaky breath. "I am Zyra Valeren, of the Xilari." Ethan had never heard of them. He had worked in deep space for years, met traders and explorers from different colonies, but he had never encountered a Xilari before. "All right, Zyra," he said cautiously. "Why were you in that escape pod? What happened to you?" Her violet eyes darkened with sorrow. "My people are dying." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" She swallowed hard, struggling to find the words. "The Xilari once had a great homeworld, but war and disease destroyed it. We were forced to flee, scattered across the stars. But our kind, we cannot survive like this. Our numbers are too few. Our bodies are failing." Ethan listened carefully, but he still didn't understand why she had come here, to this remote mining station. "And you came to me because—" Zyra looked at him with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat. "Because humans might be the key to saving us." A dangerous truth. Ethan sat back, trying to process her words. How could humans save an alien species? "Look, I'm just an engineer," he said. "I don't know how I can help with this." Zyra shook her head. "It's not about knowledge, Ethan Cole. It's about genetics." That made him pause. Genetics. She nodded, her fingers clutching the blanket tightly. The Xilari have lost the ability to reproduce. Our DNA is breaking down. But humans, your genetic structure is adaptable, resilient. We have studied your kind for years. You have survived in the harshest conditions, evolved beyond limitations. If we can combine our DNA with yours. She trailed off, her expression a mixture of desperation and hope. Ethan exhaled slowly. You're saying you need human DNA to restore your species. Zara looked at him with pleading eyes. Not just any human. You. Silence filled the room. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, staring at her. This was insane. He was a simple miner, not a scientist, not a doctor. And now an alien woman had crashed into his life, asking him to help save an entire species. But as he looked into her desperate violet eyes, he realized something. She had no one else. Whatever happened next, his life would never be the same. Ethan stared at Sarah, his mind racing. You need my DNA, he repeated, still trying to process what she had just said. The alien woman nodded weakly. Not just yours. Any human could help. But you are the first I found. The only one. Ethan exhaled sharply, leaning back in his chair. He had come across strange things in deep space, but this was something else. Zara's breathing was still unsteady, her silver skin pale. He could see the exhaustion in her violet eyes. Whatever had brought her here, she had risked everything for it. Look, I don't know how I can help, Ethan said, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm a miner, not a scientist. I don't need a scientist, Zara whispered. I need a survivor. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? She shifted slightly, wincing at the movement. Your kind, humans, you are different from all others in the galaxy. You adapt, you endure. While other species perish, you find a way to survive. Your genetic code carries something unique, resilience. Ethan folded his arms. And that's supposed to save your people. Zira nodded. The Xilari were once a powerful race. We had knowledge, technology beyond most civilizations, but war took everything from us. She paused, her eyes darkening. Our enemies unleashed a bioweapon, a slow and cruel one. It did not kill us instantly. Instead, it made each new generation weaker. Our bodies could not heal properly. Our immune systems failed. And worst of all, we lost the ability to reproduce. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. That's horrifying. Yes, Zira said quietly. We fought to survive, but in the end, there were too few of us left. The last of our scientists searched for a solution, and after years of study, they discovered something remarkable. She looked at him again, her gaze filled with something close to awe. Humans, your species should not have survived the things you've endured. The diseases, the wars, the harsh environments. And yet you did. You adapted. Your DNA is the key. Ethan leaned forward, trying to wrap his head around it. So your plan was to find a human. And what? Take a blood sample. Do some experiment. Zira hesitated, then shook her head. No, it's not that simple. We need full integration. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You mean? Yes, Zira admitted. A true genetic bond. If even one Xilari successfully combines with a human, our species might have a future again. Ethan rubbed his temples. This is crazy. I don't even know if our species are compatible. We are. The certainty in her voice made him pause. We studied your biology. Our genetics are more similar than you might think, Zira said. It's why I was sent to find you. Ethan sighed. And what if I say no? Zira's expression faltered. She lowered her gaze. Then I have failed. And my people will disappear forever. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the station's systems was the only sound in the room. Ethan could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him. What was he supposed to do? He had come to this station to escape responsibility, to live a simple, quiet life. And now, in the span of an hour, he had been thrown into a decision that could decide the fate of an entire species. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, sharp alarm. The console on the wall flashed red. Incoming vessel DTT'd. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He rushed to the control panel and pulled up the scanner feed. His blood ran cold. It wasn't a human ship. The vessel was large, dark, and heavily armed. Its angular design and crimson markings were unmistakable. "Drovan," Zyra whispered, her voice filled with fear. Ethan turned to her. "You know them." She nodded. "They are the ones who destroyed my world. They hunt us. They must have tracked my escape pod." Ethan clenched his jaw. Damn it. His station was just a mining outpost, not built for combat. He had basic defenses, but against a Drovan warship, no chance. He turned to Zyra. "Can they detect you?" "Not yet," she said. "But they will. If they find me, they will kill me." Ethan glanced at the scanner again. The Drovan ship was holding position, scanning the asteroid belt. Searching. They had minutes before it found them. His mind raced. He had two choices: hide Zyra and hope they leave. If the Drovan didn't find anything suspicious, they might move on. But if they searched the station thoroughly, they'd find her. Run, take Zyra, and flee on his old mining vessel. But that meant a dangerous chase, and he wasn't sure they could outrun a warship. He turned to Zyra. "Can you fight?" She hesitated. "I can, but I am weak." Ethan nodded, making his decision. "Then we run." Zyra's eyes widened. You would help me." Ethan took a deep breath. "I don't leave people behind." The station shuddered as the Drovan ship activated its scanners. They were out of time. Ethan grabbed Zyra's hand. "Let's go." The station trembled as the Drovan warship hovered just beyond the asteroid field. Ethan's console flashed red warnings, his systems struggling under the intensity of the enemy scans. "They're looking for you," he muttered, glancing at Zyra. She stood beside him, her silver skin pale under the emergency lights. Her violet eyes flickered with both fear and determination. "We don't have much time," she said. "If they find me, they will not leave any witnesses." Ethan clenched his jaw. He wasn't a soldier. He was a miner, an engineer. He didn't sign up to go against an elite alien warship. And yet here he was. He exhaled sharply and made his decision. "We're not waiting for them to find us. We're leaving." A desperate plan. Ethan sprinted toward the storage bay, Zyra close behind him. His station had only one small mining ship, a rugged old vessel, built for asteroid drilling, not space combat. But it was fast, and right now, that was all they needed. As Ethan ran diagnostics on the ship, Zyra stood behind him, gripping the cold metal railings. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "If they capture me, they might spare you." Ethan scoffed. "I don't trust murderers to keep promises. Asterisk, 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 and besides." He looked at her, smirking slightly. "I don't like bullies." Zyra blinked, surprised by his words. Then, for the first time, she gave him a small, grateful smile. Boom! A tremor rocked the station. The Drovan had fired a warning shot. Ethan cursed. "They're getting impatient." He grabbed Zyra's arm. "We need to go. Now." The chase begins. The hangar doors opened with a deep, metallic groan. Ethan's mining ship blasted off just as the Drovan ship locked onto them. A warning signal blared inside the cockpit. "Tar GT Loki KDTTTD. They're going to fire." Zyra gasped. Ethan didn't waste time. He slammed the controls forward, sending the ship into a steep dive between the asteroid belt. Massive rocks tumbled around them, creating a deadly maze of floating debris. A bright energy beam from the Drovan ship cut through the darkness, just missing their hull. The force of the blast sent their ship spinning. Ethan gritted his teeth, fighting for control. "Hold on." He twisted the controls, maneuvering through the dense asteroid field at breakneck speed. The mining vessel wasn't meant for this kind of flying, but Ethan knew his ship like the back of his hand. Another explosion erupted behind them. A Droven pursuit craft had been deployed. Small, fast, and deadly. "They're sending fighters after us," Zyra warned. Ethan's fingers flew across the controls. "Then we better lose them." Dodging death, the small Droven fighter zoomed after them, weaving effortlessly through the asteroid belt. It was built for combat, designed to hunt. Ethan had no weapons on his mining ship, no shield strong enough to survive a direct hit. But he did have one advantage. He knew how to use the asteroids to his favor. "We're going into the storm." Zyra's eyes widened. "What storm?" Ethan pointed to the navigation screen. Ahead of them, a swirling ion storm crackled with lightning, hidden deep within the asteroid belt. The Droven fighter was right on their tail. "That's suicide," Zyra protested. Ethan smirked. "Only if I don't know what I'm doing." Before she could argue, he plunged into the storm. Into the storm. Static filled the cockpit. The ship's sensors flickered, struggling against the storm's electromagnetic waves. Outside, violent blue lightning arced across the asteroids, shattering smaller rocks into dust. Zyra clutched her seat. "I hope you know what you're doing." Ethan kept his grip steady on the controls. "I don't, but I'm a fast learner." The Droven fighter followed them in, but it was built for precision, not chaos. Ethan zigzagged through the storm, dodging bolts of ion energy. The Droven ship tried to keep up, until a massive lightning strike hit it dead on, causing it to explode into a fireball. Zyra gasped. "You did it." Ethan let out a breath. "We're not safe yet." The main warship was still up there, waiting beyond the storm. If they exited now, they would be sitting ducks. Zyra suddenly placed a hand on his shoulder. "I have an idea." Ethan glanced at her. "I'm listening." "A clever escape," Zyra explained quickly. "The storm's energy disrupts scanners. If we shut down the ship's power for a few minutes, we can disappear inside the storm." Ethan's eyebrows raised. "Like hiding in plain sight." She nodded. "They'll think we're destroyed." It was risky. If they powered down, they would have no shields, no propulsion, nothing. If the storm got worse, they might never be able to restart. But it was their only chance. "All right," Ethan agreed. "Let's do it." He flipped the emergency shutdown switch. The lights flickered off. The engines powered down. The ship drifted silently in the storm. Ethan and Zyra sat in the darkness, barely breathing. Minutes passed. Then, the Droven warship moved away. Ethan grinned. It worked. Zyra exhaled, relief washing over her. "We're safe." Ethan reached for the controls, powering the ship back up. The engines hummed softly as the lights returned. Zyra looked at him, admiration in her eyes. "You are impressive, Ethan Cole." Ethan smirked. "Stick with me, and you might see a lot more." She chuckled, shaking her head. "I think I already have." As their ship emerged from the storm, the Droven warship was nowhere to be seen. They were free. But Ethan knew their journey was far from over. Ethan gripped the ship's controls tightly as he guided it through the vast emptiness of space. The Droven warship was no longer in pursuit, but the danger wasn't over yet. They needed a place to hide, rest, and plan their next move. Zyra sat beside him, her glowing violet eyes scanning the star map on the screen. "Where can we go?" she asked. "Somewhere the Droven won't find us." Ethan tapped a few commands into the console, and a holographic map flickered to life. A remote star system appeared, surrounded by a dense asteroid belt. "This place," Ethan said, pointing to a small moon. "It's an old smuggler's hideout, long abandoned but still functional. No one will think to look for us there." Zyra studied the map. "Are you sure it's safe?" Ethan smirked. "Safe? No. But it's better than waiting around to get caught." With a flick of his wrist, he activated the ship's hyperdrive. The stars stretched into long streaks of light, and they jumped into hyperspace, the forgotten moon. Minutes later, they arrived at their destination. The moon was small and lifeless, covered in craters and dust. But hidden beneath its surface was an ancient smuggler's outpost, built deep into the rock. Ethan carefully maneuvered the ship into a narrow canyon, following an old landing beacon. The entrance to the base was barely visible, a steel door half buried in the moon's surface. As the ship touched down, the dust settled around them. Zira peered through the cockpit window. "It looks dead." Ethan shrugged. "That's what makes it perfect." They stepped out of the ship, their boots crunching against the dusty ground. The air was thin, but breathable. Ethan approached the steel door and brushed off the dirt covering an old keypad. "Let's hope I remember the code." He punched in a sequence of numbers. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a loud hiss, the door slid open, revealing a dark tunnel leading underground. Ethan grinned. "Welcome to the smuggler's refuge, the underground base." The corridors were cold and silent, lined with flickering lights. Dust covered every surface, and abandoned crates were stacked against the walls. Zira shivered. "It feels haunted." Ethan chuckled. "Maybe it is." They reached the main control room. Ethan powered up the systems, and dim lights flickered on. Screens glowed weakly, displaying old security footage and energy levels. Zira checked the air filtration system. Oxygen levels stable. Gravity systems still working. Ethan nodded. "We can stay here for a while." Zira sat down, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion. The past few days had been a whirlwind of danger and escape. Ethan watched her, then cleared his throat. "So, about this whole saving your species thing." She looked at him, her expression serious. "Yes, we must begin the process. The genetic integration." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Right now." Zira nodded. "The sooner we start, the better." Ethan leaned back. "I don't know about you, but I'd rather figure out exactly what we're doing first." Zira tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Ethan gestured to the abandoned control panels. "If we rush into this without understanding how it works, we might make things worse. We need to study the data, run tests." Zira hesitated. "I do not know if we have that kind of time." Ethan shrugged. "We just bought ourselves some time by escaping the Droven. Let's not waste it by making mistakes." She studied him for a moment, then finally nodded. "Very well. We do it your way." A dark discovery. Ethan pulled up an old map of the base. "There should be a medical bay on the lower level," he said. "If we're lucky, it still has working equipment." They moved carefully through the corridors, the air filled with the scent of dust and rust. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Finally, they reached the medical bay. The doors creaked as they opened, revealing examination tables, flickering monitors, and broken equipment. Ethan powered up the main console, and a list of old research logs appeared. Zira frowned. This is genetic research." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Looks like someone else was studying this before we even got here." Zira scrolled through the files. Hybridization experiments. Failed compatibility tests. Then, one particular file caught her eye. Human axillary compatibility. She turned to Ethan, her voice quiet. "Someone knew about this, long before I even arrived on Earth." Ethan's jaw clenched. This wasn't just a random discovery. Someone had already been working on a solution. Zira clicked on the file, and an old video log appeared on the screen. A human scientist, his face hidden in shadows, spoke in a distorted voice. "Project Genesis, Phase 3. The axillary species is reaching genetic collapse. Their only salvation is through human DNA." The screen glitched for a moment, then the video continued. "But the Droven cannot allow this. If the axillary survive, their power will rise again. The war will begin anew. The Droven have sworn to erase every trace of this research, and anyone who holds it. Zira's hands clenched into fists. This is why they are hunting me. Why they are hunting us. Ethan nodded, his expression dark. They don't just want to stop you. They want to erase every possibility of your species' survival. Zira looked at him with determination. Then we must not let them. Before Ethan could respond, the base shook violently. The alarm systems blared. Warning. Unauthorized entry detected. Ethan and Zira exchanged a look. They were not alone. Ethan stared at the screen, his heart pounding. Human axillary compatibility. The file name alone was enough to send a chill down his spine. Zira leaned closer, her violet eyes scanning the data. Someone has been studying this, long before I even arrived on Earth. Ethan exhaled sharply. This wasn't just a random idea. Someone already knew that humans and Silari were genetically compatible. Zira's fingers hovered over the console. But who? And why? Ethan clicked on the file, and a holographic projection flickered to life. It showed a human scientist in a worn-out lab coat, his face covered in shadows. His voice was distorted, but his words were clear. Project Genesis, Phase 3. The axillary species is reaching genetic collapse. Their only salvation is through human DNA. Ethan clenched his jaw. They've known for years. The video continued. But the Droven cannot allow this. If the axillary survive and evolve, their power will rise again. The war will begin anew. The Droven have sworn to erase every trace of this research, and anyone who holds it. The screen suddenly glitched, and the video ended. Silence filled the medical bay. Zira whispered, "This is why they are hunting me. Why they are hunting us." Ethan nodded. The Droven don't just want you dead. They want to erase any chance of your species surviving. Zira's hands tightened into fists. Then we cannot let them. Ethan agreed. We need to get off this station before they track us here. But before he could say another word, the station shook violently. The alarm systems blared. Warning. Unauthorized entry detected. Ethan and Zira exchanged a look. They were not alone. The intruders. Ethan grabbed a nearby plasma cutter, the closest thing to a weapon he could find. Stay behind me. Zira hesitated. I can fight. Ethan smirked. Let's hope we don't have to. They moved through the dark corridors, the emergency lights flickering. The station trembled again, a clear sign that a ship had docked. Then, footsteps. Heavy boots, armed soldiers. Ethan peeked around the corner. A squad of Droven warriors, 6 of them, clad in dark armor, scanning the area with glowing visors. One of them, clearly the leader, spoke into a translator device. Find the Xilari. Kill the human. Ethan's grip tightened around the plasma cutter. So much for hoping. The escape plan. Ethan pulled Zira into a side corridor, whispering urgently. We can't fight them head-on. We need to outsmart them. Zira's mind raced. What about the station's power core? Ethan raised an eyebrow. What about it? Zira's eyes gleamed. We can overload it. A controlled explosion. It will disable all power in the station, including their weapons and scanners. It will give us just enough time to escape. Ethan grinned. I like the way you think. Zira smirked. I told you, I can fight too. The countdown begins. They sprinted toward the engineering bay, dodging security drones that flickered to life. Ethan hacked into the control panel, bypassing old security codes. Okay, setting a power surge. 30-second countdown. Zira nodded. That's all the time we need. As the system began overloading, a loud hissing noise echoed from behind. The Droven had found them. A laser shot whizzed past Ethan's head, burning a hole in the metal wall. Go, he shouted. They ran, dodging enemy fire. The lights flickered wildly, sparks raining down as the station's core began to destabilize. They reached the docking bay just as their ship's engines powered up. Ethan shoved Zira inside and jumped into the pilot's seat. "Hold on." The ship blasted out of the station seconds before the explosion erupted, sending a shockwave through space. The Drovan ship was caught in the blast, its systems flickering as debris smashed into it. Ethan punched in hyperspace coordinates. "Let's get the hell out of here." As the ship jumped to safety, Zyra let out a breath of relief. But the war was far from over. Now, they had the truth, and the real battle was just beginning. The alarm's shrill noise echoed through the abandoned smuggler's base. Ethan's heart pounded as he grabbed Zura's arm and pulled her away from the console. "They found us." Zura's violet eyes darted toward the doorway. The walls trembled as heavy footsteps echoed from the corridors. "How?" she whispered. "The Drovan shouldn't have been able to track us." Ethan clenched his jaw. Someone must have sent a signal. But who? Zura's hands balled into fists. "We don't have time to figure that out. We need to move." The betrayal. Ethan led Zira down a dark passage, the emergency lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. His mind raced. How had the Drovan known where to find them? Then, a chilling thought struck him. Was there a traitor? Before he could voice his suspicions, a blast door at the end of the corridor suddenly slid open. A figure stood in the doorway. A human. Ethan froze. No, it can't be. The man stepped forward, a smirk on his face. "Dr. Kellis." Zira gasped. You were the scientist from the research logs." Dr. Kellis chuckled. "Very good, Salari. I was wondering when you'd figure that out." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "You've been working with the Drovan this whole time." Kellis sighed. "Not exactly. I was working for the Xilari before the war, trying to find a way to save your species, but then I realized." His expression darkened. "Your survival would mean another war, another galactic disaster. I couldn't let that happen." Zyra's voice trembled with rage. "So you sold us out." Kellis shook his head. "I made a choice for peace." Ethan scoffed. "Peace? You call this peace? Helping the Drovan wipe out an entire species?" Kellis sighed. "You don't understand. The Drovan aren't just here to kill. They want to end this cycle before it begins again. And you, Ethan, have ruined everything by helping her." Zira's eyes glowed with anger. "Then you leave us no choice. Fight or die." Before Kellis could react, Zyra lunged forward. Her speed was inhuman, her reflexes sharp. She aimed a powerful strike at his chest, but at the last second, Kellis dodged. A hidden plasma blade flickered to life in his hand. Ethan cursed and pulled Zyra back just as Kellis slashed at the air between them. The energy blade sizzled, cutting through a metal pipe like butter. Kellis smirked. "You're not the only one with enhanced abilities, Silari." Zira's eyes widened. You modified yourself." Kellis grinned. Asterisk, asterisk, a little human cell ground, facing Dr. Kellis, the man who had betrayed them. His plasma blade hummed with deadly energy, casting a faint red glow across his face. Ethan clenched his fists. "You're insane." Kellis smirked. "No, Ethan. I'm the only one who sees the truth. If the Xilari survive, the war will begin again. I made a choice for peace." Zyra's violet eyes burned with anger. "You betrayed us. You sold my people to the Drovan." Kellis sighed. It had to be done. Without warning, Zyra lunged. She moved faster than human eyes could track, her enhanced strength giving her an edge. But Kellis was ready. He dodged to the side, swinging his plasma blade toward her. Ethan reacted instantly, grabbing a nearby metal pipe and deflecting the attack. Sparks flew as the weapons clashed. "Run, Zyra," Ethan shouted. "Get to the ship." Zyra hesitated, but she saw the determination in his eyes. He wasn't going to leave without a fight. With a sharp nod, she turned and sprinted toward the exit. Kellis growled. "You're making a mistake, Ethan." Ethan swung his pipe again. "No, the mistake was trusting you." The escape plan. Zyra raced through the corridors, her heart pounding. The base shook violently as Drovan ships fired upon its outer walls. They were running out of time. She reached the control room and activated the base's defense systems. Old automated turrets sprang to life, blasting at the incoming Drovan forces. That should slow them down. She then opened a communication channel to their ship. "A system, prepare for immediate takeoff." The ship's engines roared to life, sending a shockwave of dust through the base. But there was one problem. Ethan was still fighting Kellis. The last battle. Ethan ducked as Kellis slashed at him, the plasma blade sizzling through the air. He could feel the heat against his skin. "You can't win, Ethan," Kellis taunted. "You're just human." Ethan smirked. "And that's why you're going to lose." He grabbed a power conduit from the floor, one of the exposed cables from the old station. With a swift motion, he jammed it into Kellis's cybernetic implant. Electricity surged through Kellis's body. He screamed, his enhancements overloading as sparks erupted from his cybernetic limbs. Ethan didn't wait. He grabbed Kellis's own plasma blade and drove it into the scientist's control module. Kellis gasped, his body twitching. His enhanced systems failed, and he collapsed to the floor. Ethan took a deep breath, his hands shaking. No more betrayals. He turned and ran. A daring escape. By the time Ethan reached the docking bay, Zyra had already started the ship's takeoff sequence. "About time," she called. "Did you?" Ethan nodded. "He's gone." The station trembled again, this time more violently. The Drovan had breached the outer hull. Ethan leaped into the ship, and Zyra punched the thrusters to full power. The ship blasted out of the base just as the station erupted in an explosion, consuming everything inside, including Dr. Kellis's dark secrets. A new beginning. As the ship soared through space, Ethan and Zyra sat in silence, catching their breath. Finally, Zyra spoke. "We did it." Ethan exhaled. "Yeah, but this isn't over." Zyra nodded. "The Drovan won't stop. They know about us now." Ethan smirked. "Then let's make sure they regret it." She looked at him, a small smile forming on her lips. "Together." He extended his hand. Together. As the ship disappeared into the vastness of space, the fight for the future had just begun.